So first of all, welcome everybody. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So feel free to submit your questions to the Q&A section. We'll do our best to get to them. Our total time for this, we're aiming for an hour. And we'll also be recording the webinar, so we'll send everybody a copy of the recording once we're done. Today, I'd like to welcome Adam Weston of Vodafone. Adam has a business development role there, and he's worked with many multinationals on their digitalization strategy and implementing IoT. We also have David Rowe with EDMI. David Rowe has a lot of IoT LP1 deployment experience, smart metering, and other applications. And he works with EDMI on their smart water metering strategy and implementing that. And then, of course, myself, Stephen Lurie with Iotrop. I'm the marketing manager here. And with that, I will turn things over to Adam Weston of Vodafone.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for the chance, for giving us a chance to come here and present today on this webinar. I'm looking forward to also hearing your presentation and David's later on. So just a bit more information on me. So Adam Weston, I look after IoT business development here in Melbourne, Australia for Vodafone. I've been here in Australia for about 18 months. Prior to that, I spent about 6 years working with Vodafone in London in their HQ, looking after commercial development for the IoT business. So all in all, just over 6.5 years in IoT. When it comes to sort of what Vodafone is playing in IoT, you know, we have a very, very strong story here. We are recognised as one of the leading telcos in the world when it comes to providing cellular connectivity to the Internet of Things. Our story started back in 2007 when we decided to address what was then referred to as machine-to-machine, now Internet of Things, as a separate business unit. So we carved out a separate business unit, pumped a heap of money into that business unit, and essentially I think got a bit of a first mover advantage in the machine-to-machine space. We did things like building our own in-house SIM management platform. As I said, we've grown quite substantially over the last 13 years to the point now where we have over 100 million connections globally. When we look at that connection base, you know, the majority of those come from two key verticals. The largest vertical we have is automotive. So I spent essentially 3.5, 4 years working nothing but automotive for a period of time there. They were the first adopters of the Internet of Things machine-to-machine technology. Lots of change in that space during that period. The second largest vertical is what we refer to as our energy and utility sector. So Vodafone connects over 20 million gas, electricity and water meters globally. That's been started again sort of probably 10, 12 years ago with 2G connectivity and sort of gas and electricity meters. Not much had really changed. So when I compare the utility sector to the automotive sector, you know, there was constant rapid change on the automotive side. Not much had really evolved when it came to smart meters over the past sort of 5 or 6 years. But we are now at the point now where we are seeing that evolution with the new technologies coming on board as customers or utilities move away from 3G connectivity and looking for, you know, to the future with narrowband IoT. So across that, you know, the 20 million connections we have in utilities comes from over 100 different utilities and customers across 30 countries. We not only have utilities as customers, we also have some of the largest meter manufacturers as customers. So they work very closely with Vodafone. In some cases, take connectivity and insert and embed connectivity into their devices from Vodafone and deploy them on a global basis. And it's also the advantage of being a global provider here is, you know, we can take learnings from different customers in different countries. You know, the example there when we're talking about water today, so, you know, we've got learnings that we can leverage from our Australian customer base here on things like, you know, ultrasonic leak detection, where I see sort of Australia is one of the leading countries developing that technology. We've then got customers in Africa where, you know, different challenges there, you know, quite often severe problems with drought in places like Egypt or South Africa. You know, around Cape Town, they had a lot of problems there. And then you've got different problems again in Europe, where, you know, particularly dealing with, you know, aging infrastructure, where, you know, that infrastructure in some cases can be 200 years old. So it's it's a unique position that Vodafone is able to draw all those learnings in from different customers throughout the world, and they're trying to pull that together and then sort of come back to the market with solutions that addresses those problems. A core part of our solution as well is we have a global roaming SIM solution. So we have a single SIM that roams onto up to 500 networks worldwide. So that 500 networks is for primarily 3 and 4G connectivity, starting to extend into 5G now. And also we're making progress on extending that to Narrowband IoT. So as of today, we can connect our global SIM to 35 different narrowband networks, 5 of which are in the APAC region. But don't just take my word for it that Vodafone is well positioned in this space. We're also recognised by the analysts as being a leader here. So the first chart on the left is from Gartner. So for 6 consecutive years, Vodafone has been positioned as a leader by Gartner when it comes to managed IoT. And that is essentially on 2 things that they assess players in this space. So it's completeness of vision. So it's, having that vision, as I mentioned before, part of that vision is fueled by our customer needs across a number of geographies and a number of verticals. But having the vision is one thing. I think that the really key thing that sets Vodafone apart is having an ability to execute against that vision. So we're also ranked highest by Gartner with regards to the ability to execute. Also transformers, so this is a report that came out quite recently as well. It does position Vodafone as a leader in this space here, particularly on the basis of that globalization of our offering. We're positioned furthest right here. You will also notice up the top here, from a number of connections point of view, the top 3 players are all Chinese telcos. We are seeing massive adoption in the IoT space in China, and I'll come back to that a little bit later on in my presentation. So as a topic for discussion today is Australia. For those people joining from Europe, Australia is just a country a long, long way away from anywhere. But just to point out, the sheer size of the country is a nice little graphic here. It shows how big Australia really is as a country. You can see, you could fit most of all of the European countries in there essentially, plus a few others. It is a very, very large country. It's also a very, very dry country. So after Antarctica, it's the driest continent on Earth. And when we look at amount of rainfall per square metre or square kilometre even, it's ranked 140 out of, I think, 180 countries. So it's a very, very dry country. Small population for a country this size, only 25 million people, but a very high degree of urbanisation. You've got 90% of the people live in an urban centre, and 2 out of every 3 people live in one of the 5 big state capitals. So whilst we have a small population, we do have some relatively large cities. Sydney and Melbourne, both over 5 million people each in those 2 cities. So that creates some unique challenges for the water customers, water utilities. They've obviously got to manage their water very, very efficiently, given how dry Australia is. There's lots of complexity which comes from, as I said there, between trying to deliver water across a wide area. In some cases, high concentration of population. In some cases, very, very sparse population. So it'll depend. Each water utility in the country will have slightly different challenges that they're looking at depending on their geographic and demographic areas. It also presents challenges for us as the telco community. There are large parts of Australia where there is no telco coverage. But what we're seeing over the last 18 months, we're increasingly seeing that narrowband IoT is becoming the technology of choice for Australian water utilities, exclusively almost in urban areas. The proprietary technology has certainly been successful in filling gaps where there's no telco coverage, and they do have some good news stories there, some really successful deployments. But we're seeing the big water utilities in the urban areas are moving towards IoT and getting themselves past the trial stage, into full deployment, running tenders, going to market, having funding to be able to sort of roll out digital metering across their entire estate. So when we look at it, this is from a Vodafone point of view, when we look at the water landscape in Australia, we're forecasting there'll be around 10 million connected devices by 2027. Majority of those are residential meters, but included in that number are also commercial meters and sensors as well. So of those 10 million, we believe that around 85% of them will be connected by cellular NB-IoT. Based on sort of the recent tender activity, we can been able to confirm, as I mentioned before, that some of the bigger utilities have confirmed NB as their preferred technology. Personally, sort of working very closely with a few of those. They've run tenders over the past 12 months and looking to sort of get into the full development and rollout of their solution very soon. We're also aware that there's a number of other big utilities trialling NB-IoT, and we're expecting them to come to market over the next sort of 12 to 18 months with their solutions. So I guess when we take a step back and sort of look at why now, why are the customers now moving? Narrowband IoT has been a buzzword for many, many years now. I think there's a few things that have impacted why these utilities are now able to make this jump. Firstly, to underpin all of this, you've got to have networks. So now that there are 3 networks here in Australia that are able to deliver Narrowband IoT, so that naturally enables choice of network, but also a bit of competition between the network providers, which is bringing the cost down. So you've got real choice, good competition between the telcos here in Australia. The other piece that is really, really key here is the cost of the devices. Now, I know a lot of the commentary focuses on the cost of the NB-IoT module when we're talking about NB-IoT adoption. And that is the case. It is an important input into the cost of a digital utility, into looking at the module, cost of the module that goes into the meter. But dwarfing that substantially is the actual cost of the meter itself. And that's been a real barrier to entry for a lot of the water utilities over the past, because those costs have just been too high for them to enable a positive business case. But we're now seeing those costs finally start to come down, get to the point where the utilities now have positive business cases. And I think David may touch a bit more on this in his presentation, but a major factor for why those costs have come down has been what's happening in China at the moment. So we're getting Chinese meter vendors enter the market at with low input, low manufacturing costs on their side, and we're also seeing China itself buying and deploying these meters en masse. We believe that there's more than 10 million NB-IoT water meters now deployed in China across the telcos there. And by the fact that they've been able to manufacture and deploy, that essentially brings economies of scale to the manufacturing process, which can be passed on to the wider buying community via lower prices. So that's happened in China. They're continuing to deploy. I think Australia with their deployment is probably still a little bit behind China, but when we're talking about the rest of the world, I think Australia is probably ahead of most of the other developed Western nations when it comes to adopting Narrowband IoT for digital water and then deploying it. So just coming on to then sort of when we talk to the utilities, what's their rationale for selecting Narrowband as a communications technology? And it really does come back to their ability to scale, particularly the larger utilities. Having that ability to work with a telco that maintains that existing infrastructure for them. Telcos have been around for a long time. They have strong balance sheets. They have to maintain that infrastructure for multiple customers, whether they be multiple Narrowband IoT customers, multiple enterprise customers, multiple consumer mobile customers. That infrastructure has to be maintained and will be maintained by the telcos. And I think having that reassurance that infrastructure is there now and will be there in 15 years' time is one of the key reasons as to why the utilities are choosing Narrowband IoT. Clearly, another way is the functionality, or another reason is the functionality that Narrowband can enable. That having that two-way communication with the device that has firmware over-the-air update capability really is mandatory. And we see, and I think the utilities also see, that Narrowband with lightweight M2M is really the perfect solution for them. It's also standardised and secure. So you're running it over a licensed spectrum over the telco network. And it's also, it's a very, very secure solution. And as I mentioned before, the device vendors themselves, not only delivering functionality, but also the commercials to enable that positive business case. So you've got the tick on the technical front, with the meter vendors now coming to the market with the meter that enables things like ultrasonic leak detection, as well as the sort of the core digital smart metering, but also at a price that enables the utilities to have a positive business case and show a positive net present value on their investment. Just to touch on a couple of points here on some future technologies. So one of them of which is already in place, but just to see what additional things that Vodafone is looking at in this space. When it comes to narrowband IoT, I think up until now it's been essentially an issue where you've had to contract with a local mobile network operator in a single country. There hasn't been the availability of roaming. But the Vodafone product has that ability, so technically Vodafone can roam onto other narrowband networks across the world. I mentioned before we can do that on 35 different networks in 33 countries at the moment. And having that roaming capability is quite attractive. There's a few business benefits there to highlight. From device vendors, so this is meter manufacturers. If you want to embed connectivity in a device, you can take a single SIM from Vodafone, insert that at the point of manufacture, and then ship that across multiple countries. So you don't have to be worrying about which device is going where, matching a SIM card to it, or trying to insert SIM cards at point of delivery. You can do all of that in the manufacturing process and streamline your manufacturing process and your supply chain. The other piece that is being taken advantage of is from the utilities themselves, being able to optimize that supply chain and do testing, troubleshooting at the point of manufacture. So the example there is if you've got a meter vendor who's based in China, using the Vodafone solution and roaming, you can test that solution in China with the Vodafone SIM before it arrives into Australia, rather than having to import a device and realise that you've got some problems with it. The third point there that I'd like to highlight is something that, again, we would need to get more roaming agreements set up with more carriers, but once enabled, once you've got in-country roaming, so this is something that's available in Germany and the Netherlands at the moment. It will be available in more countries as it progresses, is to essentially, that in-country roaming, which would then enable you to then essentially select the network with the strongest signal to connect to. So there's ways that we can work with the device vendors to program algorithms to say, for example, if coverage is X, connect to this network, if coverage is Y, connect to Y network. And what ultimately that will mean is by connecting to the strongest network all the time, you'll have improved device performance and a longer battery life. A couple of things that are definitely sort of more into the future is a project we're working on with ARM, which is integrated SIM. So essentially that's removing the physical SIM card and SIM card holder and placing it onto the chip itself, which will further optimize battery life and increase functionality. I think that's probably 12 months away from being productized by Vodafone. I'm aware there's other similar types of products in the market as well. Then the third point there is EUICC SIM transformation. That's probably a bit further away, thinking at least 2 years away from now. EUICC SIM transformation is something that our automotive customers do on a very regular basis now. So it's mainstream and mandatory in the automotive space. The problem is it doesn't work in accordance with NB-IoT at the moment because essentially you need to be able to send and receive SMSs, which NB-IoT doesn't deliver at the moment. But we are working with the GSMA. We're actually co-chair of a working group looking to solve this problem. So once that problem's solved, it does enable things like being able to change the telco provider over the air, which then gives you the added benefit of not being locked into a telco provider indefinitely, which is quite important if you're investing in a device that's going to be out in the field for 15 years. I've included a couple of little videos here if you're interested in seeing more about the iSIM and the Vodafone, what we're doing with ARM and others in this space, for people to look at their leisure. But with that in mind, my 20 minutes is up. I will pass you back to Steve. Steve, are you with us?
Yeah. Sorry about that. It just took me a second to get everything worked out there. Thank you, Adam. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Excuse me, just had to get a little technical issues worked out there. Good. So really quickly, my name is Stephen Lurie. I'm with Ioterop. I'm the marketing manager here. And I'll be talking a little bit today about our perspective on smart water metering solutions. Really quickly, before I get started, let me give you a little background on our company. So our founders are former executives with Intel, and they have a lot of combined executive experience and IoT experience. Our focus early on was really on standards and getting device management, really efficient device management services onto the device. And this led to our first project, or our first product, Iowa, which we came out with in 2017. And now, currently, we are board members at the Open Mobile Alliance, and we're working to develop the specifications on lightweight M2M. But of course, this is a global effort with companies like AT&T, ARM, Itron, T-Mobile, Qualcomm, and Ericsson. You know, the operative word in this marketplace, smart water metering, is kind of sustainability. So customers are looking to deploy solutions with a minimum lifespan of 10 years. And so I'd ask you to take a moment and to think about, you know, the different phases of a product life cycle and what those require. So what we see is, you know, of course, things start with the product development. And here, there's some things that are apparent very early and some things that are less apparent. So the things that are often very apparent are, you know, what they want as far as solution functionality, development cost, device costs, time to market, issues like that. Things that are less apparent early on are more strategic, and these are the long-term operational costs and issues like interoperability. And these things really affect the sustainability going forward of the solution and how things are going to play out. And, you know, Adam was talking about NB-IoT and the offering of telecoms and how important that is to have that reassurance for those organizations as they deploy. And it's kind of the same thing for on the product side as well. Then we see something like commissioning. So here's where you start to see the project development really have an impact here. So once you receive your devices, you know, how do you commission that device? How do you update security credentials on the device? How do you do that with as few resources as possible? And there, what you see is the choices you've made early on in your product development phase are going to dramatically impact how you do that and the costs associated with that. That continues on the operational side. You know, is the solution from top to bottom efficient? And so there's issues on battery and energy consumption, and then there's also issues again on the operational side. And finally, you look at something like decommissioning. So you can imagine devices sometimes are stolen, they go missing, they behave strangely, and so how do you deny access to a device, or how do you wipe a device, or issue new security credentials? So all those issues are challenging for a lot of organizations and really need to be addressed early on in the design phase in order to have a solution that's sustainable. And what we see as we engage with our customers is their thinking seems to be kind of in three different mindsets. And so many people early on are focused on the data. You know, IoT's product is data, and it's kind of a natural inclination. But there's many more issues to create a sustainable solution than just data. There's another group that's kind of a legacy approach. They're looking at using what they know, existing tools, and build a solution from what they know. And then there's the third group, the kind of what we call the I get it group, which is more focused on the solution needs, and they have much more of a long-term vision and an exacting focus on rationalization of resources. And then finally, there's almost a philosophical question that they ask at some point, because many people think that they can do a lot of these things themselves. But at some point, they have to ask themselves, are we a technology company or are we a solutions company? Where do we want to focus our resources? And so, you know, for these types of projects, experience and perspective are really important, because where you start from, the perspective you start from and how you start is going to determine where you end up. So all roads do not lead to Rome. And, you know, things like device management, you know, you don't have a device management problem until you've deployed thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices remotely. And the same thing about operational costs and challenges. You don't really understand those until you have all those devices out in the field and you have to sustain them for over 10 years. And that's where things like standards and interoperability are so interesting. And we're gonna dive in a little bit more depth with that. What the market is starting to understand is that for these smart metering solutions and smart water metering solutions and massive IoT applications, NB-IoT and lightweight M2M are a great marriage. They, as global standards, they marry very, very well. As I mentioned before, there's this initial focus on data, but to build these solutions that people are looking to deploy and have out there in the field for a long time, you got to do all the under the water issues there. And that really goes back to the device management there. And that's where you get the long-term efficiency gains. That's where you get the long-term operational gains. And IoTerop, we're fortunate in that we're kind of bearing witness to this. So we see this in certain marketplaces like Australia, where most of the large tenders are all going towards NB-IoT and lightweight M2M 1.1. I should add that it's 1.1. And then we also see this, so Australia at a certain level, and then we're also seeing this with our customers and analyst groups like Gartner, who increasingly are getting it as well. Just like to take a moment to dive into lightweight M2M 1.1 and a little bit more on the services here. Something that's important to understand is don't get sold a false bill of goods. If you're looking to build NB-IoT solutions, you want lightweight M2M 1.1 and not 1.0. It's because that there's some blocks, some technology blocks in there that are just you need to have and sort of build these efficient NB-IoT solutions. And how we think of lightweight M2M is we think of it as kind of a super standard. So it's composed of different substandards that are part of that. So on the data side, you have shared object models. You have things like CoAP for data transport, DTLS, OSCORE for security, and then lightweight M2M device management functionality. So all these things have been brought together in order to build solutions that are very efficient on one level, so efficient as a technology standpoint, but also address the strategic issues of interoperability and standardization and economy of scale. And this is so we see that, for example, if you look at a service, for example, a battery operation. So remember, again, device longevity is kind of a key KPI for keeping these solutions out there. People are looking for a minimum of 10 years. And that's where we see things like what lightweight M2M does with CoAP, which is addresses a huge challenge. So when you have, when you're using a network like NB-IoT, things like TCP and TLS are just too costly in terms of energy consumption. That's really a huge challenge for many organizations. We covered this a lot in our previous webinar. The link's down there, ready for NB-IoT, ready for mass market. But that's one of the places where we really see NBI or lightweight M2M where it really shines. Another service, for example, is security. So everybody talks about security, but it's something that needs to be conceptualized and integrated early on. So you can imagine, okay, so you've received your devices from a factory somewhere. The first thing you would want to do from a security standpoint is replace the credentials. You don't want to leave the existing security credentials on there. And that's where lightweight M2M, everything has already been addressed here. So you have a bootstrap server that's apart from the actual device management server. So there's an abstraction layer there. And then, just with a few clicks of a mouse, you can deploy new security credentials to a single device or thousands of devices or all your devices. No keys are exposed. This is all done over the air. No personnel is needed. And of course, security is maintained. And this security issue, it's, from the get-go, you need to address this, but also throughout the whole life of these devices, because your devices are remote, they're exposed, and this, again, these are 10+ year deployments. These services go back to very much of a kind of an idea we're in the process of shaping here internally, which we talk about zero-touch field service. So this is kind of the ideal. We're not sure, at one point we'll get there if we'll be able to get here. But the idea is that the richer your device services, the lower the intervention cost. And that's really key for these organizations, because as people go forward to deploy these, cost, the higher the cost, that just it works against adoption rates. Wanted to talk a little bit about interoperability, because interoperability is one of the key value propositions for lightweight M2M. So in lightweight M2M, you have these standardized data objects, and they're both aligned around actual device management functions and also around data reporting for industries. So there's thousands of these objects. There's many of them just for device management, at 56 for water here. And so what's interesting about this is you kind of have this concept of with smart water meters or other IoT objects where they're plug and play. So if you've built a lightweight M2M compliant object and you're using it in a device management system, if you want to move it over to another one, it's very quick and easy to do. So there's this notion of, it's almost like an insurance policy. It's change management. And I think going forward, what's interesting is it's kind of transformative of how we think of building and deploying these solutions just in general, because companies now, kind of the old guard who traditionally built their own solutions and managed their own solutions, now are saying, oh, we can build our own lightweight M2M solutions and manage our own lightweight M2M solutions, but we can also manage partner or other solutions out on the marketplace with our device management platform. So once you build and also share our data within our industry or with other industries, and these are real strategic issues going forward for organizations. They like that flexibility, they like that openness, they like that concept of interoperability. That's important. At Iotrop, we've been working hard to bring this all together and to make this as simple as possible and as easy as possible. So it started with Iowa, our client-side device management services. And so it's really state-of-the-art. It's in our estimation and in the estimation of our clients, its capabilities are unmatched in the marketplace. And so first point I'd call attention to is it's very, very compact. It's literally a tenth the size. The footprint on the device is a tenth the size. So already you save upfront on the device cost, which is very important. We're able to get it onto devices like 8-bit microcontrollers. Like recently we did this with microchip AVR device with a very small memory footprint. And then the other thing that's important is it's simple and powerful. So developers are able to use it, get up to speed very quickly. And then what we've done now is earlier this year, we released Alaska, which is our device management platform. So these things are optimized to work together, but of course, they're all based on the lightweight M2M standard. They're all compliant. So if you want to use one or the other, that's really up to you. And you have that flexibility going forward. Just like to call attention, if you want to see a little bit more about Iowa, we do have an evaluation version up on GitHub, so it's now easier than ever to get started with that. One of the key parts of our value proposition and one of our best marketing tools is Iowa. And so, what it allows people to, it just simplifies development. Developers like to follow a standard practice and something that inspires confidence. And so once developers get going on Iowa, what they appreciate is the simplicity, the support, and the documentation. And those are really important. And those are things not everybody is able to provide. And at a corporate strategic level, then when you build solutions off of those services, you get all the things that are addressing your strategic issues, which are time to market, you can control product development costs, and you get a standardized solution. And David Rowe will talk a little bit about this in his presentation as well. If you look at a service, for example, just to give you an idea of how easy this is to do, we can take something like firmware. So firmware, essentially today on a large tender, is a de facto requirement. Your devices, if you can't do a firmware update, your devices are not secure, they're not sustainable. And I think just a few months ago, they were talking about a vulnerability on Thales' devices. So you need to be able to address vulnerabilities as they come up. You just can't ignore those. And so with Iowa, basically, you just have 5 lines of code. And this is all documented and very easily to do. So in the case of our customers, very often they're able to have a working concept. In some cases, as little as a few hours. And in the case of Alvaco, they actually developed a product and released a product in 3 months, which is record time. And so addresses that time to market issue really well. So the key takeaways I'd say for this market and just, smart water metering, smart metering in general, and massive IoT is that the key KPIs are operational costs and energy management. Those make your projects more sustainable. The starting point, if you want to manage operating costs, is not the data, it's device management. And then finally, that global standards are strategic. They're strategic in the sense that they've addressed all the technical issues, so you get a high quality solution, but they also check the boxes of interoperability, economy of scale. We're seeing that NB-IoT data pricing keeps coming down, device pricing keeps coming down. And so your go-to-market strategy, the costs are going to keep going down with this. And then finally, it's kind of an insurance program for your investments. So you ensure that your investments are well protected. And we believe this, but more importantly, the market is starting to get this as well. And people like analysts or people like Gartner are getting this as well. And with that, thank you for your time. And I guess I'll turn things over to David. David?
Yes. Hi. Okay, let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, I have quite a short presentation, but welcome to stay around and ask questions at the end. I basically have two roles in EDMI. I'm sort of the product manager for creating the offering. And I also look after the major accounts in Australia. So I get very good input directly from people who may potentially want to use our products. So it keeps me amused for a while. Brief history on EDMI, in case you're not familiar with them. They're actually an Australian company. They started around 1978, known for making very high quality electric meters, smart meters later. And after building up a reputation, they were bought out by Osaki from Japan, 100% owned by Osaki now. And we have multiple manufacturing plants all around Asia. But most of the design work for the electric smart meters is actually done here in Brisbane. So we have a massive pool of engineering excellence up there. I'm sure most of you would have heard of them. So Osaki bought us for our engineering skill, and now we basically design and make electric meters for Japan. And we have a plant in Shenzhen, China that does this. The design is done here in Brisbane, so that's pretty good. They're fully listed, and they're a reasonably big company, considering they mainly do electricity meters. And we now also have gas meters. We have smart gas meters that run our CAD M1. So the next logical step for the company was to get into water and reuse all the assets that they already have developed over the last several decades. I only have a few slides, so bear with me. I got involved with water metering about 10 years ago. In 2006, I started with electricity smart metering. Around 2010 and 11, I got involved with water metering and started making loggers for some of the Australian utilities. Loggers over Zigbee was a popular thing at the time. And so I've been following this market very closely for quite a while. And as far as I'm concerned, the drivers were always there for smart meters. There were business cases that were there. And this survey, which is quite interesting, from 2014, gives you some of the feedback of where the benefits were. And most of them seem to be around customer-centric benefits, but also there were some costs associated with smart metering, which allowed them to defer network upgrades, reduce manual reading, reduce leaks, which is the product they make, so they obviously don't want to waste it. And a new one, of course, that sort of snuck in was the occupational health and safety, where meter readers injure themselves, and that happens even in electric meters. And that's quite a significant contributor to a lot of the business cases that are around. So if everyone's been wanting these for 10 years, why hasn't anyone rolled it out? And it comes down, in my opinion, to two elements. The cost and the technology wasn't ready until recently. And if we look at what's changed, say, in the last 3 years, that's now got everyone excited about smart metering. There's two things, in my opinion. One is the actual cost of the product. When smart meters first came out, they were at least $300 each. Then on top of that, there were the European meters, which were more, and then the Chinese entered and really dropped the price down a lot, but the functionality wasn't there. But what's important is the core components used in these meters have become a commodity item now, and that therefore then drives the product cost down. The chipsets have come down, which is awesome. So even having a smart meter that's at an affordable price is great, but you need a network. And I'm very familiar with LoRa. I deployed a LoRa network as the last mile in 2011 for a Middle Eastern country. Phenomenal results. But all the utilities in Australia were telling me, they need a robust, proven network that's going to be around for 15 years with guaranteed service levels. And I was aware of NB-IoT from about 2014, but it took a while to get to market. So if we look at the market today and the opportunity that's there, we have a low component cost, we have high manufacturing capability, which reduces the product cost, and we have a wonderful NB-IoT networks in Australia with a choice from 3 vendors. And so this combination is what's got everyone excited about being able to now really deploy smart meters and get some of the benefits that they've been working on for a very long time. I normally do customer presentations, so I'm used to questions. I'll just keep going. So again, just recapping, what are some of the challenges facing them? Leak detection, meter reading. They got tangible financial benefits. Customer service is what they want to do because most of them are government owned, and they have a very strong KPIs on providing high level of customer service. Pressure monitoring is key. They do that with $50,000 bunkers, but now we could do it with a very cheap ultrasonic meter. And of course, the old argument about the inaccuracy of mechanical meters over time, and smart meters tend to alleviate that. The rest are I think some of the other key drivers, which is, of course, as I said, having a choice of network from very well-established players using a common open standard and being able to deliver 10, 15-year SLAs. That to me is key. So having the network, having the meter is great, but then we need one more thing on top to really go after this market, and that was we needed an open standard for protocols, because everyone has told me they don't want to be locked in. They're happy to look at the best of breed head end, best of breed MDN, best of breed meters, but if they all come from one vendor, that's great, but they don't want to be locked in. And that's where Lightweight M2M came really into its own. After extensive analysis, there was nothing really close to it that gave me device management, protocol, and a solution that was ready to be implementable in a very short time. So those 3 things are key. Second, well, of course, the meter vendors and business risk. If you're going to buy a product that's got a 10-year warranty, 15 to 20-year operational life, you want it from a vendor that's been around for a while and that's going to be around for a while. And that's why it made perfect sense for EDMI, who's been around since 1978, to get into smart metering and offer it. We have 50 hardware and firmware engineers in Brisbane. We have a huge facility to support our gas business in Dandenong in Melbourne, where we're an accredited gas testing agency. So we'll build that up to be the water metering hub. So combine those 2 together, and it puts us in a very good position to offer an open metering standard product for the Australian market. And of course, the cost of ultrasonic meters, they've dramatically come down when I first started looking at these 8 years ago. So that's pretty much why I think now is a good time to get into this space. It's ready. It's the next growth industry, in my opinion. I'll briefly share with you what most of the smart meters do and what they should do in order to realize some of these benefits. And that's, of course, interval data, totals, alarms, where you can send them immediately or you can send them once a day. And these are some of the list of alarms that everybody really wants. Leakage alarm, stop wastage of product. Reverse alarm to stop plumbers installing it the wrong way around. Empty pipe to show it's commissioned and alive. Battery. Temperature is not that key. Pressure is very important. Tamper is okay. Burst pipe is key. And measuring a lot of metrics around the flows, the maximum dailies, and being able to set a myriad of alarms allows a lot more processing to be done at the back end, because to get sense and business value from the back end, you need a pointer that collects the data. And so we aim to do all of that. And has been covered before by Adam. We must have firmware over the air upgrades, which over NB-IoT works beautifully. We don't have a problem with it. It's great. We have enormous amount of memory because of the low cost, so we can store a very long time of data. There's really no practical limit. It'll probably outlast the meter. Commissioning, of course, is very important. So we did a lot of work on a fully automated commissioning system. Keep in mind, we read 2 million electric meters every single night. And we manage the life cycle from factory to deployed to decommissioned with our Storm head end. So we're integrating that to become a management platform for these meters. And again, it's a choice. You can use it if you want to, or you don't have to. And that's the beauty of open metering. Of course, for local operations, we have the optical port and the NFC to do a lot of operational tasks. So anyone who makes a smart water meter for Australia would do this. But of course, there's a lot more than this that makes it compelling. And again, built on lightweight M2M, which is key. Why we went down this path after looking at the market, if you look at all the Europeans, they pretty much have their meters hardwired from the back end to the meter. You buy the meter, you buy their back end, you buy their mobile application device for reading it, and everything's a one-stop shop. And that's great for those markets. Having spent 10 years in China, I can tell you for a fact, if you go to any of them and give them a large order, they'll give you a team of developers to build whatever you want, and it'll be yours. And that's it. Neither of those two options were suitable for us. We really wanted the ability to rapidly create new products. We wanted an open standard between the device and the back end. And lightweight M2M provided the perfect solution for it. The perfect implementable production-ready solution. Those points are very important, and I'll come to that in a minute. So yeah, we're basing our whole water meter platform and strategy on lightweight M2M. Let me talk about our friends on the call here. When doing the market analysis, we looked at a lot of choices and a lot of vendors, pretty much everything on the market that could give us a lightweight M2M head start with a robust mission-critical production-ready solution. So the factors that came into consideration were speed to market. We didn't want to work with someone to help them develop the product. We wanted a finished product that would allow us to get our product to market. And we needed the maturity of the code, the documentation had to be ready and go. So we just read it and implement it. Leading features, of course, having version 1.1 on our product is awesome. Support. In the early stages, before we came up to speed, we needed enormous support, basically phone call support on a daily basis. And then when you looked at the cost benefit of buy it versus build it, that was a key part in the commercials and the attractive pricing models that were offered. So when we combined all these together, there really was only one choice that was available and viable, and I don't have to tell you who that is. I think you can have a pretty good guess. So we're very happy with the current company. And my last slide, because I'm hoping there'll be a lot of questions, the kind of value proposition we offer to the market and why we think we'll make a significant and compelling offering to the market is for several reasons. We're a local company. We've been here since 1978. We have a huge gas operation that is being extended to become an accredited water meter testing facility in Melbourne. We had firmware developers and hardware developers in Brisbane. We're in the same time zone. We speak the same language, and we understand the same needs of the market. And it's a pretty big company, about 800 million a year. So direct sales from EDMI to customers, no small distributors in the middle. That gives us a very strong local presence. And of course, our financials are very good. So there's no risk. We can sign 10-year warranty contracts, and people who buy from us will know that we're going to be around. The network, we have 3 telco providers here, so the customers have choice. We will work with all 3 of them, and that's a great thing. And having the lightweight M2M stack on top isolates us from most of it. One of the challenges I'll tell you is getting a good signal and meeting all the RF requirements in a confined space in a water meter. That is challenging. So, but we're on top of it. We built this specifically for Australia based on feedback over the last 10 years that we've been collecting from the major utilities. And we'll keep releasing every 3 months. We use Agile, software Agile framework. Every 3 months, we'll keep releasing products. So you're not actually going to be stagnant and left with one code base that there's no more future for. We'll also extend our range of meters because the platform we created to run the lightweight M2M and be NB-IoT capable can be extended to loggers, to large meters, to environmental sensors, just basically driven by customer demand. And the beauty of lightweight M2M is you just define new objects to define the new features of the device and reuse all the other 90% that you already built for the previous device. It's an awesome speed to market for new products. As I said, we will be offering a backend of choice for those who want it. We're currently reading 2 million meters a night of a lot more load profile data than what we would ever get from a water meter, and we're doing that every day. We will offer that with the lightweight M2M support as well for those who want a complete solution, and those who want a backend provider that's in Brisbane rather than having to try and get someone in Europe to pay attention to what you want. Locally built, locally supported for the local market. NB-IoT is, of course, to me, the only choice. I've been waiting for it since 2015 when I first saw about it. So I'm pretty excited that it's here, mature, and ready to go. So overall, we can offer a reduction in costs, increase in revenues due to curtailing product losses, great customer service, and of course, proactive decision-making with the data that you collect from the meters. You still have to do something with it at the back end, but you need to get it before you can do something with it. That's about it. I know it's very short. I'm used to presenting to customers normally, so I had to cut this down a bit for the guys on this call. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions at the end, but that's all I have for now, Steve. So would you like to take it back?
Great. Well, thank you, David. And we'll take a first question here. Someone asked in the chat room. They said, "Can you tell us?" This is a good question for you, I think. Can you tell us how easy or challenging it was to develop your meters, IoT devices on lightweight M2M? And where did you see challenges during the development phase?
There's two questions. The first one is, as I said to you, we chose Iotrop because of their support, maturity of product. That took away all the pain. The second thing is there's not a lot of skills around in Australia to actually go buy them. You can't hire lightweight M2M developers. We were in an enviable position because we had a very strong pool of senior firmware engineers from our gas and electricity metering. So it was very easy to reskill them and put them on this team.
Okay, great. Let's look at the other here. Let's see. Here's a question to you again, David. What is the current cost achievable today compared to the 300 Australian dollars before for a smart meter?
Yeah, it's significantly lower than that. I can't give you specifics in this forum, but it's significantly lower.
Okay.
Sufficient to the point that it's becoming viable for rollouts.
Okay. Good. Let's see. Okay. What about, let's see, what about putting other sensors in meters such as pressure or vibration acoustic sensors?
Not a problem. We already have a pressure sensor and we have inputs for other sensors, so not a problem.
Do you use lightweight M2M standard objects for the data for the meter reading?
Yes. We want
Okay.
interoperability, so we're not going to create our own. Use as many of the standard ones from the OMA website as possible so it can interoperate.
Okay. A lot of these questions are directed to you already. Adam took the opportunity to answer some of the questions on the networking side. There's a question here. I'm not sure if this is answerable, but we'll see. What is the typical size of FOTA and how much energy does it consume? Do you have any information on that?
No, nothing I want to share.
Okay.
But we can estimate that, you know, over a 10-year life, if you do 4 upgrades, there'll still be enough power to keep it running for well beyond 10 years. It all comes down to how often you want to do it, not the size of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Frequency is a key issue. Okay, let's see. Here's a question. What does smart mean indicate? Smart metering and smart communication. Do you want to take a stab at that, David, or should I?
Yeah, you go for it. Yeah, it's quite a general question.
Well, certainly on the smart side, I guess for me, when I think of these types of applications, smart water metering, you really need to do everything with a surgical precision. So to keep these devices out in the field with the energy constraints and the networking constraints, everything you need to do, reporting data, using the network, needs to be done intelligently. And the smart on the device side, for me, the smart part about it is that you're able to do this electronically and at a lot lower cost than ever before. Any other questions? Let me, okay, yeah, here's a question, probably a good question for Adam. Could you describe which are the known issues about changing MNO profile in the EUICC for NB-IoT? Adam, you there?
Yeah, sure. So the issue currently relates to that to complete the SIM profile transformation, you require SMS, and SMS is not currently available on NB-IoT. So it's something we're looking at the moment. I believe the device needs to send an SMS back to the EUICC subscription management platform. That's how it's set up to run at the moment, because NB-IoT doesn't enable that. We can't build at the moment. So there's a couple of things that we're looking at to either redesign and the EUICC standards so that you don't need to use SMS, and there could be another option to look to redesign the NB-IoT standards, which will then enable SMS on NB-IoT. But at the moment, it's not possible. It's something we're looking at, and I think it's probably 2 years away before there's a solution in the market that can actually do that.
Here's a question here for I think interesting one for me. Senthil Nathan asked why lightweight M2M protocol is not getting momentum, and that's a valid question. And I would argue it is getting momentum. But the first block that was necessary was a global LP1, and so we've gotten that now with NB-IoT. And you can't do connected objects without connectivity, and so NB-IoT as a global standard now is creating certain economy of scale as far as the devices, and you're seeing the pricing come down on the data plans dramatically. So now that block is in place, that's really a key enabler for lightweight M2M, and the two together, the joint value proposition is what interesting, not each one independently. So I think those two things are interrelated there. And that's one of the reasons why we're especially interested in NB-IoT as well. Let's see. What other questions? Reading through here. Okay, here's a question, technical question. Do you plan to use Cat-M for photo or only use NB-IoT?
Is that to me?
Yeah, I think that'd be for you, David.
No, we're only doing NB-IoT. We don't see any problem with it running over it. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, which is lightweight M2M was designed to deliver that over NB-IoT. And the key point you brought up, which is these aren't massive amounts. It's just that it's more about the frequency you're doing them. And of course the battery issues. Okay, let's see. Okay, it's just a question here. I think this would be for David about most recent projects, challenges, expectations versus reality. Did you, as far as difference between expectations and reality there? Kind of an open question.
Yeah, that's a bit of an open question. As I mentioned to you, I've been involved with water metering for 10 years, and I first built loggers for Sydney Water in 2010 or 11. I've seen most of the cycles that they go through, and a lot of attempts, which I won't name, have not been successful for the reasons that I've outlined previously. But you can go take a proprietary network and build prototypes and get small deployments going, which is wonderful. You can buy high cost magnetic meters from Europe and get 1 liter power accuracy, but all those things are not going to come together. It's like the planets being lined up. You needed them to line up to get volume rollouts here. And as I said to you, the chip cost coming down and the network availability and the open standards of lightweight M2M come together to offer utilities a compelling solution. And I think they will move now after many failed attempts over the last 10 years that I've seen.
Okay. There's a question here about the difference between 1.0 and 1.1. I just like to call attention. We previously did a webinar, NB-IoT Ready for Mass Market, where we went into great detail about this, but also we have on the call our CEO, Atam Uzlati, and maybe let him address this.
Yeah, of course, Lightweight 1.1 is actually very mature right now, and it's very compelling when it comes to operating on challenging narrowband networks, and especially well designed for NB-IoT. We can even say that 1.1 is almost mandatory for NB-IoT. There has been some optimization, especially in the bootstrap, in the registration, in the way to interact with the object that is fairly well optimized and cope with the latencies of NB-IoT and cope with the bandwidth limitation of NB-IoT. For 1.0 is much more verbose, and it's more consuming in terms of battery, in terms of transmissions compared to 1.1. There are also some drastic optimization when it comes to the support of different security mechanisms that include OSCORE, for example. And especially 1.1 has been designed as well to work on non-IP networks. So NB-IoT NIDD is also covered as part of the lightweight 1.1 specification, whereas it's not operable on 1.0. So all those typically optimization way also to address the devices when you want to integrate the devices and change different resources. Actually, you have only one single operation to do that. Whereas in 1.0 you need to have several transmissions of packets to handle such kind of things. So it's fairly optimized in terms of battery consumption, bandwidth consumptions, and also nice optimization that makes it very compelling on top of narrowband networks.
We just came up on an hour here. We need to let our panelists here, Adam and David, get back to their regular life. Hold on. Oh yeah, just there was a question about the recording as well. We are recording this, so we'll be providing a recording of this, and we'll ask Adam and David for permission to share their presentations, and if they're okay with that, we'll share a hard PDF copy of the presentation. Thank everybody for attending. Special thank you to our panelists, Adam and David. Your content was very valuable, and hope everybody has a great day.